Okay, welcome to episode 85 of my Draconian Necromancer series. On episode 84, I beat the game, but I talked about how I should go back a few turns before I started being sloppy with my heroes and troops and such to review some of the major highlights of the game and review ending troops and heroes and stuff like that. So let's do that. Some things right off the bat. This is where I ended up with casting points. So I really prioritized this. Grabbing some Hearts of the Tropics was helpful, but I was usually fighting to not go bankrupt most of the time, so I did not spend money on building up infrastructure to get. I really didn't buy anything in the way of infrastructure. In fact, the extent of it was Dark Tower for reanimators, and then burial grounds for bone collectors, which I only produced one or two of. So I didn't end up using them as much for the anti-machine stuff as I thought I would. I was mostly these three cities for the longest time, and then much later in the game was able to take and hold these, but it was really just three cities most of the time, which is also why my knowledge accrual is so low, and why I'm still working on stuff. But in terms of what I ended up with, you can see what I ended up with in terms of empire upgrades. Most of the essential stuff I did not really ever get. So I was doing this late game, doing a lot of this mid game, some of this occasionally, this very rarely, and trying to keep this up, though it was a target of disjuncting for a while. Disintegrate very late in the game helped a few times. Wreck helped a few times with machines. This helped a bit, especially with Dreadnought stuff raising, or not Dreadnought, Warlord raising some of their stuff to keep me from having my own troops being targeted. Used Dark Gift a bit. Same with Necron a bit. This very rarely. Never really used this. Desecration a few times. Killer Instinct some. Stiffen Limbs a bit. And never got to use Scourge of Undead. That came really late. So what else should we talk about? So you can see they were achieving stuff around 20s, 30s, 40s, and then I was achieving stuff that they had left for me much later. In terms of my Draconian governance, I really only got to was here for much of the game, which I appreciate the casting points for the leader as well as a few heroes. Was helpful. And again, I was just hasty plundering most cities I came across because I wasn't able to hold them. And in terms of my troop movements, as you may recall, I started here, checked here, saw Dreadnought stuff here, so got pushed back pretty quickly in here. I had a troop movement that danced around and came back here, and then I had a core of units that never left here. So my second biggest thing was going this way with the stack. A lot of muddling around here, trying to keep this city, take this, just getting warlorded here. But once I broke the push, then I came here, grabbed these, and then went down like this. Took out Warlord Cap, took out what's the face's cap here. And then about when I was here and starting to move here, I was able to send an army here down through the heart, mess with some Dreadnought stuff, ran away from them, came down through here, and then these were the first people to be taken out. It was the Sorcerer, Draconian Sorcerer, took them out around what, maybe turn 60 or 90, I forgot. And then once this, and this were taken out, then it was cleanup from there, going up through here and I forget the folks that took out this, right? Okay, yeah. So I think they had, it was the army that took out this, looped up through here, went underground, went here, went underground, and then came some was here. I think this was their capital. Yeah, and then took out the dreadnought capital, and then down here, and then relocated to up here was where the other folks' capital was. Yeah. So yeah, it's still playing out because I'm a few turns back before I started getting sloppy. So that was what was up with that. Now the stuff that folks are interested in, again, really pithy, unattractive cities. Let's talk about heroes first. So this guy did some stuff in the upper left-hand corner, leading an army. Nothing super interesting. Very late in the game, never had a chance to use it, but did build up to Undying Army on him. This was my third Necromancer, my first Gould Necromancer, I think. A little bit of decent defense, but that was really it. I was messing with dreadnoughts most of the time. This was a late acquisition. This was also a late acquisition, as was this. He did some Rust Strike stuff. This guy was hanging around the base, was my sorcerer hanging around the base doing some stunning stuff. A little bit of that, and yeah, to do with that. Yamani was a late addition. Echo was my star for pushing back the dreadnoughts. We did not have this until late, which is too bad. It's really kind of cool versus machines. But definitely prioritized some fire protection as well as some physical defense. So a little bit of physical from Dreadnought, the fire protection there. So he did tremendous amounts of work for me. This is my leader. Not really great stats. He was built to ghoul people. So that was his focus, especially with the energy drain, inflict ghoul curse, inflict despair, inflict curse. That was his whole thing. Yeah. And this was a late edition. Goblin Rogue, his whole thing was shadow forming to give massive defense to fight against the warlords, which was helpful, but he was super fragile, especially with that health. She was my first, I think, to hit level 15, and my first Chaos Rifter, so that came in handy a few times, but it did take a while. I love the gas breath, I love the AoE stuff, and just getting the extra damage channels from this sort of thing is really nice for upping the damage, and I think she had both the capacity, freezing projectiles, as well as stunning and scorching, so that was, had some good hits with her, and not too beefy, tried to keep her safe. This was a late addition. He was, I think, putzing around underground with some folks. He never saw a lot of tremendous action, never got to use the steadfast ward that I went into. This guy was my main heavy hitter on the left side. It's interesting, both of my dreadnoughts were doing that. Even higher defense than the other guy, a lot of defensive things. Physical protection plus his native 20% from toughness, right? Is that what it's called? And then I got the enchanted armor of sturdiness for another 20%. And so between this and the 40% physical protection from a cast of shadow form from the Goblin Rogue made him 100% physical protection. So I had some fun with that, and he was pretty essential in some battles. Even some of the Siege Engine got some love in one particular battle, which was useful. This was my second person to hit Chaos Rift, and was doing some work along with these, who I'll talk about in a moment. For anti-machining, the resistance was up, as well as the fire protection, given all the fire damage they were doing. So I had some fire protection, some hit points for that. This was my second and only hero that I started the game with, the initial one you can hire. So I started with 2 necromancers, and so he was also focused on ghouling units. This was a late edition, would have loved to have that early, but wonderful piece of armor. This was midway through the game. Fire protection, appreciated fire protection. So mid-tier stats, but a lot of great percentages, although it's mostly due to that. So it looked more like this, but what was important as fire protection was pretty strong. So he did a lot of work for me. This guy was kind of, and the people who were streaming through the middle on the top side, he did a little bit. He never got to use his steadfast ward. Really liked this, the fire protection. Had this early for the defender, and so he wasn't in the thick of things. He was granting toughness to everybody in the army, which was good. This guy was a very late addition. Would have loved to have this shield earlier, because that fire protection would be really nice for people. This was also a late addition, and I had, bringer of goodwill type headgear or feet gear or whatever, where I could get it on several heroes to keep the costs down, because I was in the red most of the game. I was raising cities to make cash on hand to be spent in upkeep, since upkeep was just a huge expense the whole time. And speaking of that, so I had up to like 6 Banshees summoned at one point, and the Dread Reapers came late in the game. Didn't end up making a huge deal, but had some nice plays later. Whispers of the Fallen was on and off, depending on what was happening. They were constantly disjuncting Whispers. So let's talk about interesting units. Champ 1. This guy up to Champ 5, so 130 health. Pretty awesome. Champ 6, 120 health. Amazing for a Banshee. I had a pair of these guys who were doing pretty well. Did a lot of work against the machines. So even though they're the mid-tier, tier 2 units, still really useful against the machines. Champ 4, 140. Champ 2, 140. Champ 5, 180. Tremendous. Champ 1. These guys didn't get very much action. More of these. Champ 1. Champ 6, 120. The animator, he was new. Champ 2, Champ 1. Champ 2. Champ 5. These guys were essential with their lifesteal ability, especially the goblin guys with the greater lifesteal. Really essential in beating back the warlords. So Champ 3 and Champ 5, those are my buddies. Champ 4 on that. Champ 2, Champ 5, that's pretty good. Champ 3, Champ 6. Champ 6, 120. Especially because you can raise them with a lesser reanimate undead, because they're tier 2. I mean, that's just so much value from them. Just really tremendous value. Champ 4. I think that is it. And I did lose a lot of champ cadavers through just suboptimal management. Champ 6. So I didn't have any Champ 7s this game, I guess. Oh, never mind. How about that? 130. Champ 7. I earned his keep. So, so I talked about heroes. I talked about troops, where my troops ended up. I talked about like army pathing and research and such. Had a few interesting events where I picked up some nice arties and such. This pure evil. This doesn't matter, which is good, because it was just absolutely trash a lot of the times, just because of all the debuffs I was getting from folks. But I think that is all I've got. So thank you for watching this. Hopefully this recap was helpful if you took the time to listen to it. It'd be nice for me at some point to maybe add to my guide a list of hyperlinks to videos and specific timestamps within the videos of some of the more interesting battles throughout these 120-ish turns in this campaign, because there are a lot of really dicey battles where I was stacked up against really difficult odds, but with perfectionism, was able to seize the day. So that might be fun to show and link to. So maybe I'll be able to put that together. And I'm also thinking about next challenges I'll do, like a heroes only, like no regular troops, just heroes only is the only thing I can use for battles. Thinking about a challenge like that next or something else. So hopefully this was enjoyable. Sorry about the crappy video editing and audio and visual quality here and there at times. It's just because I'm working with a janky setup and a crying kid that makes me walk away from the computer or shut things down really quick and then come back later. So hopefully the editing wasn't too choppy for you all. But yeah, thanks for being here, and thanks for hopefully checking out my other content as well. Bye.